Whoa, that was more than I anticipated. That was not good.
Is he sweating? Yes. And we're ready to do this thing.
Do you want this
Get this a
one
little
to do
organized
more?
before we start, yeah.
This is Hot Ones and Zeros. Welcome. The premise of this series is that we're going to ask Jeff Leek here, our Chief Data Officer and lead of the Data Science Lab, a series of questions while eating hot sauces that get progressively hotter. We have to do our disclaimers, of course, so none of the answers and dialogue here are the official opinions of the Fred Hutch Cancer Center. None of this is medical advice. In fact, please don't do any of this. And please don't sue us, especially Hot Ones, who are taking inspiration from for their glorious series. All right, so let's get started and prep our first batch here. We're doing the veggie nuggets, so doing a little bit eco-friendlier.
And we're starting with Murder Hornet, so it's starting real easy.
Got a lot on there, okay.
You don't have to go as big.
Is that a challenge? Okay. Jeez. Okay, all right, Murder Hornet. It is a honey bourbon hot sauce, okay? All right, Jeff, why does Fred Hutch need so much data?
Nice, going right into it. All right.
Did we turn the recorder on?
Oh, we did not.
Okay, we might have to start again.
Gotta get the ASMR, you know, the chewing noises and pain.
Okay, so hold a second.
Okay, so far it's a little hot. I think it's gonna get real.
All right.
And ask again.
Yes,
Yeah.
let me ask again. Why does Fred Hutch need so much data?
Right. Thanks for the question. That's a great starting question. The Fred Hutch is an incredibly inspiring place. It's the place where bone marrow transplantation got started. It's a place that ran all of the clinical trials for all of the COVID vaccines that have helped change our whole world. And all of those discoveries that happen at the Fred Hutch are done on the basis of collecting data about our patients, about people around the world who use these biological and biomedical discoveries. And so data is kind of at the heart of everything we do here. And the Fred Hutch does it in a huge way. We collect data at a scale that sort of dwarfs a lot of places around the world. And so having a data science lab is important to be able to support all of those people that need to use data to make the incredible discoveries and care for the patients that come here to the Fred Hutch and trust us.
Yeah, so you'd say data is important to have a powerful impact.
Yes, I would say, as a chief data officer, I would say, yeah, you probably need some data to have a powerful impact. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, up next we've got Alaskan bullwhip, kelp, and piri-piri hot sauce. All right.
All right.
I'll go first this time.
Here we go. I wonder if I'm going to do less and less as we go farther and farther along. But right now I'm still fully committed.
All right, you got to bite first,
Okay.
and then I'll ask. What made you want to become a data scientist? If you weren't a data scientist, what other job or profession would you have been interested in?
That's pretty good. Lately we've been talking about the chief goofing officer, which is I think what I would prefer to be, even over a chief data officer. I started off, the way I got into data was actually, I had this amazing job when I was an undergrad. My advisor hired me to go camping in the Sawtooth National Recreation Area and collect mountain pine beetle data. So I would drive up there and stay for a week in the summer and live by the lake and go out and collect mountain pine beetle data from these traps. And then we would take those data back and model the outbreaks of mountain pine beetles, which were killing the Sawtooth National Recreation Area at the time. And it was an incredible job because I got to get paid to camp and lots of other things, but also it was sort of the first time where I was collecting data and then analyzing it. And I had always been kind of a mathy, geeky type person. And so seeing that intersection of doing something real with math and with statistics was really inspiring. And so I got really excited about doing stuff with data, and I've been doing that ever since. I thought about being lots of things, an aerospace engineer, a doctor, all these other kind of things, but ultimately I think I love the idea of being able to do lots of different applications, and data is a great place to do lots of things all at once.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like that was, you had sort of this field component and then a data component, and somebody who did a lot of ecology back in the day, would you say you didn't like the field component and would prefer to do the data component?
I would say that I have both been in the field and in the lab, and I am a terrible lab scientist. I should be allowed nowhere near the lab, but I loved being a field scientist. It was really amazing, and now I just get out in the field for fun rather than for work, but I loved that part too, actually. So yeah, I like having my hand in both the application and the data. How about you?
Ooh, yeah, I think I spent
one too many summers, like baking in the hot sun, and I feel like it fried a few brain cells, and so I like to move back to the numbers where it can be air conditioned and climate controlled. But like you, yeah, I think just seeing the results is really fascinating, which is sort of why I moved that direction too. Cool.
A Villa Gorilla hot sauce, honey chipotle. Number 3.
Lots of honey sauces. I'm into it.
Yeah.
All right. Talk about a time you were really proud as a mentor. What did you and your mentee learn?
Whew, all right. And just so everyone knows, these were not previewed in advance, so I'm coming up with these on the fly. Let's see, there's so many, that's a hard question because there's so many different times that I've felt that way. I think anybody who gets into being a professor, educator, or anything like that, one of the things that gives you most energy is when people are able to do cool stuff that they didn't know that they could do. I would say, rather than just one person, the thing that makes me happiest in being a mentor is when I work with somebody or I hire somebody and they start off doing one thing and then they realize that they can do a lot more than they originally thought that they could do, and they kind of expand the scope of what they're able to do and start doing more and more, and sort of find their own kind of journey towards something that they get really excited about. And that's happened often enough that it's sort of addicting. You like get really addicted to the idea of empowering people to do really cool stuff and like making them think they could do more than maybe they even thought they could do when they started. And I think that's sort of the highest leverage thing you can do as a person who has to mentor people.
Okay, kind of like getting addicted to hot sauce.
It's a little bit like that, yeah, and I gotta finish my nugget.
So, not to pick on you a little bit, but can you think of an example you'd want to share? It sounds like it's happened a lot. Any particular ones coming to mind?
Yeah, it has happened a lot. I'm going to go into the Wayback Machine so that, like, because there's lots of people here in the room and in other places that I've mentored, I think, a little bit. And so I'm going to start kind of early in my career. And there was a couple of people, one of them named Alyssa Frazee, who was a grad student of mine. And when she started off, she was doing genomics and she was really excited about it, but doing a biostat program. But then she came to me and she sort of was like, I don't know, I really think I want to be a software engineer. I don't know if I really want to be a biostats person. And was like, I don't know, could I go do this program in software engineering? And, you know, that was at the time in a biostat program was kind of a weird choice to make. And I was like, yes, you should definitely go do it. She went and did the program. She came back. She ultimately ended up becoming like this incredible software engineer at Stripe and all these other places. And sort of like her career has really blossomed, and still know her and we still have this great relationship. And she's doing stuff that's way different than what I ever worked with her on. But it was like exciting to see her figure out her own path to something cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So up next, we're doing smoky aardvark chipotle. I believe it's a habanero sauce. Going to smoky this round.
Starting to get into the habanero, so it's getting serious.
Yeah, serious business. Career trajectories are rarely straight lines. What was the biggest twist or turn your career took?
Ooh, that's a good one. There were a few different times that it kind of went off plan. I would say the two biggest ones that come to mind are I finished my PhD in biostats and immediately thought I want to have a wet lab, so I should learn how to do wet lab biology. So I joined a stem cell biology lab, and I made a deal with my mentor that I would analyze all their data if he would sort of have his lab teach me how to do stuff in the lab. And it was a stem cell biology lab, and I killed all the stem cells, like relentlessly. I was like a consistent stem cell problem person to the point where like they had to have like an undergrad follow me around the lab and make sure I wasn't like doing bad things. And so I realized fairly quickly that wasn't the career path for me, and I was going to go back to computational biology, and did end up hooking back into that. And then the second one was just a few years ago, kind of just before the pandemic. I'd been a biostatistician. I'd been doing mostly like genomic stuff. And then my friend Daphne Kohler came to visit Hopkins and asked if we wanted to do this Coursera thing, which we did, and then millions of people showed up, and then we started doing all this online education stuff, which created a lot of what we're seeing here today with the data science lab, and then also doing a lot of training in the community and becoming kind of a community-based data science trainer, where big veer-offs from the traditional path, I would say, are the biggest ones for me.
Did you think you'd be a world-famous Coursera instructor when you started out?
Yeah, it's been a little weird. That whole experience was really weird because how it happened was Daphne came and said, we have this company called Coursera, and I was like, what is that? And then I kind of did it as a favor to her, really, and we had no idea. And I remember the moment that it kind of, Roger, Pang, and I were two of the first instructors, and we were in the hallway, and we were like, wouldn't it be cool if like 1,000 people, we taught 1,000 people about data. And then the next day we emailed the like Coursera people, and we were like, how many people enrolled in the class? Just haha. And they wrote back, 50,000 people have enrolled in your class. And so there was this sort of moment of like, that's a lot of people.
Oh no.
And so we started putting all this stuff up on the internet, and like did we broke everything, because, we would put like some kind of training materials on the website, our personal website, and then it would crash our personal website when all 50,000 people would show up at once. And then people started tapping me on the shoulder in airplanes because they'd like taken my class online. So it was like a very weird transition and not expected at all. We sort of, who'd have thunk that that 5 million people would come and take data science courses. And now people in our data science lab came here because they took some of our early courses, like Howard in our data science lab took Roger's early courses and found his YouTube videos, and now that's how he came and worked for us. So it's created all these virtuous cycles of just putting yourself out there. So it was a great experience, but a pretty bumpy ride.
Excellent. Yeah. All right, up next we have classic sriracha. Okay, so taking a little bit of a turn back to data science a little bit. What are some interesting exceptions in data science or statistics that you've encountered in your data analysis that goes against well-accepted theory or required the use of an unconventional practice? What did you do with that information?
The questions are getting harder as the hot sauce gets hotter. Yeah,
that's by design.
So many. This is gonna get real tough then. Let's see. So many exceptions. I feel like, especially when you go in statistics, the sort of statistics grew out of math, and math likes to sort of create structures and frameworks and abstractions and rules for how the world works. And so statistics kind of has a similar vibe to it, that like there's a way the world works, and you write a model about the world, and you kind of describe the world via that model, and then the real world happens, and almost never does that. There's the famous saying, all models are wrong, some are useful. And you experience that every time you open up a data set. So you sort of see data that doesn't look normal, or it doesn't fit like the line that you would like it to fit, or the model that you built that you thought would be perfect doesn't work that well. So a great example of this, like very recently, is we're working on one of the research projects my current research group is working on is looking at karyotyping data, so pictures of chromosomes, and trying to automatically detect mutations in those karyotype images. And we built a prediction model that worked super great on the data from one set of years, and then we started applying it to the new set of years, and like it didn't work at all. And so what happened is like the machine changed, or the way that they took the pictures changed, or something changed. We don't really know yet. We're still in the midst of figuring out what it is. This is an example of where you built the model and you use data to build the model, so you kind of assume it's going to work in the future. And then, once you actually get new data, everything can go off the rails. And then you have to kind of do the exploration of like, why did that happen? And part of the fun part of doing this kind of job is like the forensic data science that you get to do when things don't work, and like trying to figure out like what's the puzzle, like why didn't it work? So happens in almost every time I've touched data that like the rules I thought applied don't apply. And then you try to bake that into teaching people, and the main thing you learn about sort of passing that knowledge on is plot your data every time, look at the data in raw form every time, talk to everybody at all levels who touched the data, and think about what could have gone wrong, and just knowing that if a result is too good to be true, it almost certainly is in data. Yeah.
So debugging is your favorite part.
It kind of is, yeah. I kind of like that part. That's the part I like, yeah. I think it's like, Sherlock Holmes style. Yeah, I really enjoy that part of it.
Detective work. Mm-hmm.
How about you?
So I did a lot of work with non-model species. Was never a human genomics person. And there was a particular ecosystem I studied that had two types of grass. And they're different species, but they do the same role in the ecosystem. They respond to drought differently depending on the conditions, and we were trying to compare at the genetic level what was happening, so the genes that are turned on and off for gene expression, but it's very difficult to compare two species, so we had to kind of come in with new approaches. But yeah, it was similar of doing detective work, kind of not knowing if this was the approach that would work or not, and that was kind of a fun experience. Frustrating, but kind of fun at the end of the day.
I can't resist throwing an ad out here for the Open Case Studies project that Carrie Wright and a bunch of folks from Hopkins, Stephanie Hicks and Leah Jager and others did, which has real data analysis examples that show all the kind of dirty details in a really public way, which is lovely and is a good place if you're trying to see what that looks like in real life. The Open Case Studies place is a good place to start. So
yeah, definitely. Even getting the data is frustrating. So.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so this one does not. It's a mysterious sauce. It does not say what peppers it is. It just says dried chilies with lemon juice and vinegar. I'm a little worried.
It's kind of lemony. It's nice.
It says we have no idea either. All right. Is data a finite or infinite resource? If one or the other, why?
I like the deep philosophy here. Finite or infinite resources? I mean, just sort of objectively, it has to be finite, right? But it's interesting that you ask a question like that right now, because if you had asked this question 30 years ago, it would be a no-brainer that it's finite and hard to get. When I was just starting off doing data work, I had to go to the mountains and collect mountain pine beetles and count mountain pine beetles one by one. That was how you got data. And so there wasn't very much of it. You had to desperately go try to find it or get it from somebody. And just in the course of my career, now it's you can't look any direction without data exploding at you. And so the rate that it's growing is so fast that it sort of feels infinite. And by that, I mean, there's never going to be enough people to look at all the data that we're collecting. I think so in that kind of sense of there's never going to be enough humans to look at it. So is it infinite? I guess maybe a little bit. Yeah.
So you think AI could do some of that work for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm definitely one of the people that's in the camp of I think AI is an incredible change in the way that computers work. I don't think of AIs as robots. I think of AIs as a new computing tool, and as a new computing tool, it feels revolutionary in the way that us all having phones is revolutionary, or us all having computers is revolutionary. And I think we're just the AI we have now is the worst AI we're all going to experience in our lifetime. So that's kind of bonkers that this is the worst AI we'll ever experience. So yeah, I think it is going to change fundamentally the way we look at data, what data we collect, what data we generate. All of that is going to change. It's always a little scary when you're in the moment where that happened. I mean, there was a 20-year period where it went from everybody having horse and buggy to basically everybody having a car. So it was these things happen fast. They go slow and then they happen real fast. And we're in the real fast part. So it's going to be a little head spinning for a while, but in a fun way.
Yeah, I miss the AOL Instant Messenger chatbots.
Yeah, there you go.
Near and dear. All right, up next we've got a poblano and serrano. Normally not the spiciest peppers, but, I guess it could be pretty concentrated. We'll see.
Is it getting to you?
Yeah, maybe a little.
I think I'm feeling it too. I'm starting to sweat.
Why and how do you choose the people you work with?
This is a loaded question when you're in a room full of people you work with. I think when I started off, very early in my career, I would always look first at the technical skills of the people that I would work with, and I think that was a pretty naive way to think about who I would want to work with, and I caused some mistakes. I worked with some brilliant but not very fun to work with people early in my career. Then over time, I sort of started to think a lot more about two things. One is, how fast can this person learn a new thing is a thing that I love. A person that loves to learn a new thing is almost always a person I want to work with, because I figure I won't know any of the things that we're going to try to do, and they might not either. But if we both are interested in learning and want to learn about how to do it, it will be fun. And then that they're kind and nice. You can kind of especially in a place like the Hutch or in a place like Hopkins where I was before, kind of the de facto is everybody's brilliant, so you can only really distinguish yourself by being nice. And so I think that there's sort of this feeling that I kind of detective, is this person a nice person? And they kind to other people that are the ways. So wanting to learn and feeling like they can learn and feeling like they want to be kind to the people around them are probably the two ways that I would pick people I work with.
I think we talk a lot, so I do a lot of training, and we talk a little bit about growth versus fixed mindset, so it sounds like you would really ascribe to that growth mindset and working with people that feel like they can learn and grow, but are probably pretty nice and kind from the start.
I think that's partially because I tend to be kind of a chaos agent and like to try all the things when they first come out, and so if I'm working with people who don't like to grow, then they get frustrated. But then, yeah, I also just think that going back to my question from the previous one, it's sort of, or answer from the previous question, it's, if you're in the middle of a revolution, you have to be able to grow and change and kind of adapt. So, yeah, I think that's a key thing to look for.
Yeah, lots of rapid change in our field, I would say.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, up next we've got black bee, hot sauce, apple, rosemary, habanero. Habaneros. Oh, dangerous. Okay. And it says it's medium. I'm not sure I really believe that.
I could smell this one. This one's like...
Smell spicy? Oh, it does smell spicy. I'm a little worried. Okay. Okay, this one's a bit of a longer one. So there have been a slew of op-eds and think pieces examining the environmental footprint of cloud platforms and other data storage options. How can data scientists balance the desire to store and collect vast amounts of data with the need to be environmentally responsible?
Ooh, yeah, they are getting harder. Okay, yeah. This is one that matters a lot to me, whether I have a good answer to it or not, because I have 2 little kids, and I'd like everything to still be nice when they're my age. So I think that there's no easy answer to that in the same way that, the environmental footprint of everything that we do is sort of not engineered in a way that's good for long-term success for us as a species and a planet. So I guess some of the answers are the same answers that you would apply to any industry, which is thinking about ways to transition to new ways of generating energy and transition to ways to being more efficient with that energy and those sorts of kind of generic macroeconomic level changes. With data, I think it is an extra interesting topic right now because when you develop machine learning models, even just a few years ago, most machine learning models would be built on a relatively small data set with a relatively small number of parameters. So maybe like a couple hundred parameters would be a big model. And now, a fairly typical machine learning model will have like a couple billion parameters. And so the way that you get those parameters to be the right numbers is you do lots and lots of essentially matrix multiplications. And once you start getting to like trillions of parameters, it's like, trillions times billions numbers of calculations that you end up with. And it takes a huge amount of computing power, energy and power and cooling to do that. And so I think being a little judicious about how big do the data sets really need to get. And so I think one of the things that's interesting is the thing that has kind of leapt us forward in LLMs and other things like that is just scaling the size of the data that we stuff into these models and then kind of using a very generic model with many, many trillions of parameters. And the question, I think, one of the things that I think a lot of computer scientists are thinking about is, could we be more clever with those models and therefore not need quite so much data? So like making them a little bit more data efficient, which would then make them more compute efficient, which would mean we have to store less data. And so that's definitely something people are thinking about, but I think it's a really challenging problem because I don't think we're sort of at the stage where we don't really understand how these models work, I think, at any kind of significant scale. And so being smart and efficient requires you to understand how something works. So there's sort of a few steps that we have to do to get to a place where we could really be efficient. Yeah. I don't know. That's a tough question, but a very important one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these sort of places that do a huge amount of compute are starting to think about that too, because energy is also going to get more expensive over time as we sort of deal with this. So it is going to be a fundamental problem. I don't know. That's a tough one.
Yeah. No, I don't think there's a right answer today. I don't think you're going to solve the problem today.
Yeah, I definitely don't have the answer to the question, but I think it's a really important question that we should all be thinking about when we're doing this. And it kind of relates to a problem that we have in biomedicine as well, which is if the rate of data collection is increasing, and I fundamentally believe there's no way that a human can look at all of the data that we're collecting, which of the data should we keep? Which of the data should we store forever? Which of the data should we not keep forever? So a great example from sequencing is when you do DNA sequencing of a person, collect data about a person's DNA, the first thing that the machine does is it takes a series of pictures and then it looks at dots on those pictures, and they trace one dot across the pictures to get the sequence of bases for a sequencing read, and we immediately throw out all of the pictures and always have. Like, that raw data just gets deleted. Nobody ever keeps it, and it's because it's just too big to keep. You would never keep it. You only keep the little like sequences. Even that's a huge amount of data, just the little like readout of all the little letters for each sequence. But people throw away already lots of raw data because it's just too big. So thinking about how do we do that more generally, how do we throw out the pieces we don't need and keep the pieces we do, is like the change from a regime where data was hard to get and expensive to a place where data is coming at us so fast. We should probably pay attention to the pieces we want to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah.
All right, we have habanero hot sauce, yellow bird. Okay, another habanero. Does this one smell spicy?
This one, yeah, it smells good. I think it's
Yeah.
gonna be good.
Do you think it'll be feasible for AI to generate biomedical data, similar to the idea of Stable Diffusion, other AI generators, so that biologists no longer have to collect and perform experiments in the future?
Whew, that is a really good question, and one I've been actually thinking about a fair amount the last few weeks and months. Yeah, I actually do think that. I know that's a really controversial opinion, and will be for a lot of people, but I think that maybe not all biomedical data, and certainly not the kind that is the most critical for making decisions about clinical trials and things like that. Probably not for a long time. But certainly a lot of biomedical data we use for discovery, yeah, I do think that fundamentally these models have the capacity to do that in the way that they're doing it for imaging and text. I think it will have all the same caveats you have for imaging and text, where it's not like you're going to believe the first thing that comes out of an LLM and say, like, I totally agree with this, and just submit it to a journal or whatever without looking at it. But I think as a tool to accelerate the way that we do science, I think it will certainly generate biomedical data in the next couple of years, and then what we'll do with it, how that will change the way that we do science, is, I think, a big open question. Because right now, say you want to collect a gene expression data set, a single cell sequencing data set, you have to go acquire samples and send it to a lab that's very expensive to set up, and then you have to do a lot of really careful experimentation with very sort of talented and well-trained people, and then you get some data, and then the whole analysis process starts. It'll be interesting to imagine what it's like if you just describe your experiment in words and out pops the data. How that would change biomedical data science and the way that the world works. And I think, well, I know this is a little controversial, but I think that world is coming. I think that's coming faster than we think.
Do you think that'll take some getting used to for scientists?
I do. I think, well, so that's the thing. I mean, I think we're already feeling that with the LLMs doing things that people are really uncomfortable with. And I think there's going to be the hardest part. Every time I talk about AI, I think the hardest part isn't the data, which we now have in gobs. It's not the models, which we can fit at these massive scales, though they're very expensive to fit. It's not the interfaces, because we can build those, whether it's a car or it's a app that you use on your phone or whatever. It's how the humans are going to adapt to the way the world works. And again, thinking of it as a tool, not as a replacement, I think helps relax people a little bit about that. Like, a couple years ago in radiology, the field of radiology, there was these think pieces in the Wall Street Journal and all this, where there'll never be any radiologists in the world ever again, because AI is just going to take all their jobs and there won't be radiologists anymore. And of course, that hasn't happened at all. In fact, there's a shortage of radiologists, and we're desperately trying to hire them here and everywhere else. And what it has done, though, is it's allowed them to move much more quickly through their day-to-day jobs by leveraging AI as a tool to do an automatic screening first, like highlight the features they should look for. And so I think when people think of AI like that, I think it's much less intimidating than if you think of it as like a job replacement,
Right.
which I think isn't the healthier, right way to think about AI.
So reskilling is important.
Yes, a little bit, which is why the Data Science Lab does so much training. Again, advertisements every which way. Yeah, training is, I think, one of the things that's so hard and scary about being in this day and age with data is that many of us who went to school when there wasn't any data, including me, had to learn to live in a world where data was everywhere, which means you had to learn new tools and how to use them. And, you know, that's happened to me over and over again, and it's happened to everybody in our field, and it's going to happen to more people with the AI stuff coming down the line.
Yeah. So this is Extreme Regret, Screaming Hot Scorpion Carolina Reaper Hot Sauce. We just went from like 5 to 100 here.
Whoa, that was more than I anticipated. That was not good. Here we go. And I
Right.
poured the exact same amount that I've done for all the other ones, so this is going to be...
Yeah, we'll see.
The suffering starts now.
All right, so last question, Jeff. How do you see emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine
That
learning?
one's for real.
Yeah.
You'll enjoy it in a
Okay.
minute.
Shaping the role of the chief data officer in the future, and how do you plan to stay ahead of these changes?
That's quite a question to ask while I'm eating this. Stay ahead of the AI and machine learning stuff as a chief data officer. Is that what the question is? I was
think
so
so.
busy suffering that
Yeah,
didn't
I
hear
can
the
read it
question.
again if you'd
Yes,
like.
Could you read the
Yeah.
question again?
All right, give me a moment here.
Yeah, you have to deal with it too.
Mm-hmm. How do you see emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning shaping the role of a chief data officer? This might not be you, maybe other chief data officers elsewhere.
All those other ones.
All those other ones. Chief puppet officer, yes. And how do you plan to stay ahead of these changes, you personally?
All right. Let's see. That is like seriously hot. I think I'm gonna use my milk. Yeah, I think it's going to change everything about the way that a chief data officer works. One of the things that's really interesting about being a chief data officer is that every single person at the Fred Hutch uses data somehow. And sometimes they use it in an Excel spreadsheet. Sometimes they use it in like a gigantic database. Sometimes they use models, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they use financial models, sometimes they use biomedical models. And all of those things, it's already kind of hard to be a chief data officer in that environment because staying on top of all the different ways in which people go off into the wilderness with data is hard, and you have to kind of pick your battles. One of the things that's kind of interesting about the AI thing is, for at least a couple of applications, it's going to kind of converge things a little bit at first, I think, where the only really mature AI technologies that are at that scale right now are kind of stable diffusion, like you said, for images, and things like LLMs, where you're generating text. And that kind of narrows the scope of what you can do a little bit. And it kind of gives you there's a series of things you got to check out. Like, is it ethical? Is it, equitable in the way that we're using it? Is it have climate implications? But it's about one thing. I think the thing that's going to be hard to get on top of is when the new future that you talked about with, we're generating biomedical data and we're using LLMs, and maybe we're using it in the clinic to help support faster clinic operations, and the whole thing is just sort of changing. I think that's where you're going to see it's harder to stay ahead of it. I think one of the advantages of being a place, that's why we called it the data science lab, is I don't think data is a solved problem, and it's a forward-looking thing. And so we have to be a lab because we're going to be constantly researching what's at that edge, what's at the barrier, whichever edge we're going to. And so I think more places need a data science lab as an opinionated guide to the problem, but it feels like there are so many different technologies that are advancing so quickly. You sort of need a group who's positioned to think about what's that future going to look like and design for that future. So that's why I think a data science lab run by a CDO is a good idea. And I am like seriously sweating now. This is like ridiculous.
You think that there's not necessarily a right answer, but you need to be ready to kind of address the new challenges as they come and be ready to kind of jump on those challenges.
Yeah, I think it's not the kind of thing where, you can anticipate a little ways down the road. Like, we're already talking about how are we going to set best practices and policies for people using LLMs around the Fred Hutch. That's a thing that everybody's thinking about. We're thinking about it too. The harder thing to predict is a little farther out. And one thing that used to be a little easier about the job was a little farther out used to be like, oh, in a couple of years I see this technology coming, and like we're going to have some time to adapt to it. It's a little weird when the technology changes on the order of like weeks or months. It's kind of hard to like really project that far out what the world is going to look like. So we're doing that all the time. I'm thinking about that all the time. What's the next thing? What's next? But it's harder and harder to like do that too far in the future. It's like predicting the weather. Changes pretty quickly now. So how do you stay on top of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And just like in Hot Ones, I'd like to make some advertisements with my last statement, which is if you are interested in any of the things we talked about here, check out hutchdatascience.org, where we have our website, fhdata.substack.com, which is our newsletter. Reach out on our Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube channels where this is going to appear to get in touch. So
We'll put all kinds of links below.
thanks very much.
All right, thanks. All right. Yay!
Good job, Ava.
Oh my god.
Good job.
So cramped.
I'm sure that was it.
I respect
You
the
would
puppets.
ne-
They did a search for my actual puppet, but couldn't find it, so it's gone missing. It's gone rogue. My puppet's like out in the wind right now.